You want to hear exactly what Raven Giuliani wants to talk to us about, her experiences in the Watchtower with this SRA. Now, bring us up to speed, Raven. Where do you live?
I'm in Central Virginia now.
And you contacted us concerning this, and you say that you were somehow, some way, ritually abused by the Watchtower. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Why don't you do this? This is the no time zone, okay? There's no commercials. There's nothing to worry about. Nothing's going to get in the way here. I've already told people that did not want to listen to this, they can exit. It appears as though a lot didn't. They're still on with us. They're calling in from all over. They want to hear your story. It's been all over the net. So what we'll do, Raven, is I'm going to just let you talk. There'll be no interruptions here for a while. Bring us back to when this all started, okay?
Well, I was a third-generation Jehovah's Witness. Grandmother was the original one in my family that was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and she was baptized back in 1940 when my father was only 4 years old. He was not raised as a witness because his father was Catholic and he refused to have it. So any contact that he had with the witnesses as a child was done in a secretive way. They ran a little farm stand in southern New Jersey, and they would get vegetables and eggs and such from witnesses that would line the baskets of fruit and vegetables with watchtowers, and that's how my grandmother got her spiritual food for the next 20 years. My father joined the Air Force in the 50s, and while he was stationed out in Southern California at March Field, he was contacted out in service by a little boy, and he recognized the Watchtower magazines as being the ones that were lining the baskets of his childhood. So he accepted them, and he accepted a Bible study right away. He and my mother were both baptized within a year, and he left the Air Force. And I was born in 1962. My father had some strange involvements, and I don't exactly know how he got involved with what he did at the time, because I was just a child. I was an infant. But for me, it pretty much started off right away. One of the oldest stories that my parents tell is about how my mother woke up one evening when I was a baby in the crib because she heard a sound. She heard what sounded like someone hit the lampshade on their dresser. And she woke up and saw a man standing in their doorway, sort of lounging against the door frame. She woke my father up because she thought there was an intruder in the house. He also saw the man. They saw that the man was dressed rather like a cowboy. Then they saw the man turn around. They saw the light flash from the hallway where my bedroom door had opened and closed because I had a nightlight. And apparently they thought this intruder in the house had gone in their baby's bedroom. So they jumped out of bed, ran in the bedroom, turned the light on. There was nothing there. My father claims that when he turned the light off, he was instantly aware of a presence, and that this cowboy was standing over my crib looking at me when I was a baby. Instantly knew that this was a demon and that it had some direct association with me. The next thing that I can remember, because I don't remember that, I was approximately 3 years old, and I remember that my parents had taught me how to read and write at a very early age. By the time I was 3, I was already reading and writing. And I remember being dressed in little blue robes and led out into the wilds, the pine barrens of southern New Jersey, in the woods with a bunch of men, and there was a lot of incense smoke, and I would be seated in a little chair in what looked like a pit that might have been 6 or 8 feet deep. And I was handed a notebook and a pen, and I was told to write. And I would write, and I would just write until I filled the notebook. And that was when I was about 3 years old. As I got older, I remembered more specific details, and to become aware of what I was actually doing. And it didn't just happen in pits out in the woods of southern New Jersey, although that happened quite frequently.
Well, Ray, we'll stop right there for a second. Now, you were a Jehovah's Witness growing up. Your family was a Jehovah's Witness?
Yes.
And your father was very strong, your mother was strong, or kind of weak?
My mother was not what anybody would consider strong, but she wasn't strong in anything. She was not a very strong personality. She was a very passive person. That was just her natural personality. My father professed to be of the anointed. He was a company servant before the elder arrangement. He became an elder when the elder arrangement came in right away. He was definitely strong. He was definitely what would be considered strong. My grandmother started going back to the meetings publicly and going out in service again when my father came into the organization. So she was a very key figure in my childhood during the 60s also.
Now you do understand that this is a very controversial issue. You do know that.
Yes. And I want to make clear, the function that I performed during these rituals and ceremonies that I'm going to talk about did not involve, for me, sexual abuse. And it also never involved me forgetting anything. I didn't suddenly remember these memories. I've always known these memories. They're just part of my childhood.
It wasn't a repressed, you didn't go to a psychiatrist and they said, well, Raven, you have repressed memory syndrome.
No.
That didn't come up. In other words, what you're saying is you remember this from young womanhood, young girl, and you carried this, and that's why I wanted you on the program tonight. Because I've talked with another person that had a similar experience, and she forgot all about it. But in her later years in life, she got some help medically through a psychiatrist, and they brought this all up. But that wasn't the case with you.
No, it wasn't. And I really can't say, if that happens or doesn't happen. I can only take the person's word for it as the person's telling the story. Everybody's got their own experiences. But in my case, the only thing that I've forgotten is just normal stuff that, I might be reminded of what color the feather pen happened to be. I may not remember it right off when I first start to tell the story, but as I'm remembering it, then I might, recall the color of the pen. But I've never actually forgotten any of this. And part of the reason I think that I didn't separate myself off from it and forget is because at the time, I didn't think it was abnormal. It was my life. It was my childhood. So there wasn't anything in my experiences that would cause me to forget it. There were frightening times, of course, but I didn't think that any of these frightening times were out of the ordinary.
Well, see, here's what happens, Rave, and I certainly wanted you to come on because not everyone discussing this subject would even come on here, and I at times might not even want them on, but I wanted you on here tonight because it was something that I could at least connect with your tone of voice, with the way that you talked. You come across as very credible, that it doesn't seem too extreme. Now, I know that when you get into, baby sacrificing and all types of crazy sexual abuse and necrophilia and all of this, that it can kind of create a sensationalized story, but you were not sexually abused. There was no violence. You didn't see any babies sacrificed, right?
No, I didn't experience any of that. Now, I cannot honestly say that stuff may not have happened, but I wasn't involved in it. My place in all of this was an oracle. I was the one who had a demon of my own, could call the demon, and there would be questions by the men asked, and the demon would give me answers, and I would write it down. I know now as an adult that what I did was called automatic writing. I would fill notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of this. Sometimes in situations where I had a little desk to lean on, or like a lap tray or whatever that I was writing on, I would write right off the page. I would write with my right hand and my left hand. So that was my job in all of this. If there were sacrifices, if there was sexual stuff, which from my own research now on certain types of satanic ritual, I know that would have been normal if it was. I didn't see it. I didn't come into it at that point. I came into it later.
Well, see what it is so many people, because when they hear the word SRA, they jump to big conclusions. It's very conspiratorial, and I can understand why, because a lot of the stuff really hasn't been totally substantiated. But your story is different. That's why I was willing to have you come on here and talk with us about this. What you're claiming is that Watchtower officials would meet, and they would have you there with them, and they would bring you in some type of a room or out in the woods, as you say, and
yes.
They would you were actually some type of a conduit for the demons. Is that correct?
Yes. What it would be called today would be a channeler. But at the time, they didn't use those words. I didn't know what those words were. But that's what I was doing. I was channeling.
So when you were young, you were, say, 3-4 years old, it started?
Yes.
And how many times a week did this take place, Raven?
I would just guess and say that it was at least once a week. The more informal gatherings, the ones out in the woods behind my house, or the ones after an elders meeting in the back room at the Kingdom Hall, those instances happened once a week, once every 2 weeks. But about once a month, I was taken to Brooklyn Bethel. And that's where the more formal ceremonies took place.
Now, walk us through that. Let's just try to, so the listening audience can digest this. And obviously, it's very difficult. You do understand that, right?
Yes, I realize that. And one of the reasons why I haven't talked about it is because it is so shocking to people, and that most people just would automatically dismiss it, not believe it, think I was crazy. That's one of the reasons why I haven't talked about it for all these years. But one of the reasons why I'm talking about it now is because I just recently, in the last 6 months or so, started talking about this online in different forums and chat groups. And I've had other people come forward and say, well, did you remember this? Because I remember this. Did this happen to you? Because this happened to me. And I began to realize I wasn't the only one. And if I wasn't the only one then maybe I'm not the only one still. And that put some responsibility on me, because there was a lot of damage done. I was definitely spiritually abused as a child. I was not given the choice to do this. It was automatically assumed that I was going to do this. I was treated wonderfully. I was treated like a princess. But at the same time, I was also expendable. And I just don't want that still happening. I don't want that happening to other children.
Well, see, what's happened here is the reason why we brought this subject up is last time on the conference call 2 weeks ago, we had a woman from London, England, and she brought some of this up. She was reading from a book that she heard of this, and she didn't have a personal experience with it, but you do. We had some witnesses that have contacted us, and they wanted to know more about this. And I know it's very, very difficult. I've got some emails. I've got some people that have actually telephoned me, and they were concerned about this subject coming up because what it does is it creates controversy. But I believe we have to go, the Watchtower organization, for all those listening online here tonight, the Watchtower organization is very esoteric. They're very secretive. We know that they're involved in all types of pedophilia and child molestation. I mean, just yesterday in the news over in the UK, a man was accused of molesting 2 younger women over there. I mean, this goes on day in, day out in the Watchtower, so it's not unusual. But what our special guest here tonight, Raven, is saying, she wasn't sexually abused. She's simply saying that she was used by the Watchtower as a conduit. She was used as some type of a spirit medium. Could you use that term, Raven?
Yes, I would consider it a channeler. I was a channeler. I did automatic writing. I was almost considered a prophetess, except what I was writing for them wasn't coming from me. It was coming through the demons.
Now, obviously, again, I say it's hard for people to believe it, but we've heard stories similar to this. Now, I'm going to ask you something. We're going to open the lines up here later as well, but you were brought into these secret arrangements, wherever they were. You say some were held right at Bethel. Now, you say they were at Bethel. Where were they at Bethel?
There are tunnels under the buildings in Brooklyn. The larger tunnels are used by some certain Bethelites. I don't know what their standard is for who gets a key, but there are tunnels that were used just for transportation, the larger tunnels. But in these tunnels, there are locked doors, and behind the locked doors, there are rooms and smaller tunnels. And it's through a series of these smaller tunnels, and I can see these tunnels to this day. I really sometimes wonder about them selling the buildings in Brooklyn, what they're going to do with these tunnels. I remember distinctly what these tunnels look like. The smaller tunnels were probably 4 or 5 feet wide, maybe wide enough for 2 men to walk abreast, and the tiles, they were tiled, completely tiled, floor to ceiling. The tiles on the floor were the little 1-inch square mosaic-like tiles. The tiles on the walls and across the ceiling were the larger 4-inch square like you would find in a bathroom. To me, it gave me the impression that for some reason these were waterproof tunnels. I'm not sure about it, but it's possible there may have even been drains in the floor. I don't know, but it gave me that impression because of all the tile. The lighting in the smaller tunnels were not fluorescent tubes; they were bulbs. They had sort of a yellowish cast to them, so everything to me, to my childish eyes at the time, looked sort of sepia, sort of a brownish beige was the coloring in there. There were doors. The doors were similar to the kind of doors you might see in a school where they had the bar that you pressed on to get into. And behind these doors were rooms. And it was in these rooms where we would go and have the more formal ceremonies. I would be taken into the room. There would be a closet, a smaller room off the main room, and I would be taken to the closet where there were blue robes for me to wear. I remember distinctly my robes were blue. There were anywhere from, I'd say, 5 to 12 men There was an altar set up at the front. To me, it looked like a kitchen counter because it had like either a granite or a marble slab on the top, and it was just a big square thing, big rectangle thing. There were chairs. I want to say most of the time there were probably 12 on each side. It was set up so that there was maybe 3 or 4 rows of 3 on each side with a center aisle dividing the two sections. Set up like a little book study, except that it had this counter, this altar at the top of it. And I would go in and I would change into my robes. There were never, that I remember, any women there to help me. I don't remember seeing any other children at the time. I would come into the room before things got started, but I was not brought out until things had already been going on, because when I came out, candles were lit, it was dark, it was smoky from the incense, and there was usually a chair set up on the other side of the altar with the back to the altar so that I was facing away from, or facing in the same direction as the audience, but I couldn't see them. I was facing away from looking at who was out there. There would be 8, 10, 12 men also in dark robes in a half circle around the front of the altar. And there would be someone with a censer smoking up the area. A lot of smoke. I can remember the way the smoke smelled. It was an odd smell. I've since been in Catholic churches, and it's not the same incense. It's a totally different smell to it. It was almost smell like burning plastic. I would sit in the chair. I would feel the trance coming on with all the smoke and all the incense, and then it would seem as if Demon was standing behind me where the altar was, and he would put his hand on my shoulder, and I would feel it go through my arm, and somebody would hand me a notebook. The notebooks were just the regular composition, black and white modeled notebooks that you use in school. But the pen was usually a feathered pen, and I remember it because I used to think they were really pretty, and I wanted to take one home. But I never got to take one home. They were dark, maybe black, maybe red, a burgundy color. Could have been purple, I don't know, but it was a dark color that the pens were. The candles were also dark. I would start writing. I would write and write and write, and when my right hand got tired, the demon would put his hand on my other shoulder, and I would switch hands and start writing with my left hand. I would write fast. I would write so fast that sometimes I would just go right off the page. I would write things that I didn't know what I was writing. I didn't know the words that I was writing, but they were words, and the notebooks were collected, and they were kept in Franz's office. And most of my childhood, when I got a little older to where I could read the words and I understood what I was doing, most of what I was working on was the book of Daniel, and it was specifically, most of my childhood was on Daniel chapters 11 and 12. And the other people that were involved with this, Brother Swingle was very much involved with this, and I remember him fondly. He was a sweet man. He would make sure when I came to visit that he'd ask me if I had finished my piano lessons for the day. He always smelled of ink. I always thought of ink when I was around him. He was the one I remember handing the notebooks to after everything was done, the ceremony was. Brother Franz was just creepy. he was an odd one. He was scary. He was kind of like the guy you imagine opening the door in the haunted house movies. I remember when I was very young, I remember Brother Noor. For some reason, I thought he was the President of the United States. President at the time was Lyndon Johnson, and I guess they must have looked alike. But I knew him as the President, and somehow my childish mind just associated him with the President of the United States. So that just made me think that it was all the more important. But he scared me. I was always afraid he was going to hit me. He was mean. Some of the other ones that were there, Henschel was there. He's another one I thought was a president. I guess he kind of resembled Eisenhower to me or something. I don't know. But most of them, I didn't associate them directly in my brain with being Watchtower governing body. They were just the men that were there. And it was Fred Franz. It was Milton Henschel. It was Nathan Noor. It was Lyman Swingle. Dan Sidlick was there. And occasionally I saw Sister Sidlick. Later on, when I was older, I remember her. And I remember whatever part she had in this. When I saw her, she was wearing red. She had on a red dress. She had on a purple robe over it. She had a long strand of beads that went past her waist, and I remember her red hair. In fact, I remember thinking that she was wearing the costume from the Jezebel drama, because that's what she looked like to me. I remember Grant Suter. I remember Carl Klein, Ted Jarrett, Maxwell Friend. He wasn't governing body, but he was there at Bethel. Some of the ones that were more local down in southern New Jersey, where I grew up, the ones that were there for the weekly things and the elders meetings, was Bill Hannon. He was my father's best friend. My father was George Pangburn. My uncle, Larry Pangburn. Asa Parker, he was an elder there at the time that this was going on. He was involved. Tom Peters. There was a guy named Leo Volpe, and recently I Googled his name and found out that he actually became disfellowshipped and started his own religion. He thought he was the resurrected Jeremiah. He was involved. There were others besides Bill Hannon. He had family that were with Russell in Pittsburgh and Brooklyn. Mary Hannon, George Hannon, that was his aunt and uncle. They weren't married. I believe they were brother and sister. If I can remember the stories correctly, George Hannon developed schizophrenia, and he was still at Bethel. They kept him there until he died. Mary Hannon is buried in the cemetery at the farm. I've seen her grave. I've also been in rituals at the cemetery at the farm. In fact, that is where we went after the memorial and had another memorial. And it was during those times with the bread and the wine that I was actually given bread and wine and partook with the rest of them. Yes.
Yeah, what happened is I don't know what happened here. Sometimes I think sabotage is involved, but I'm back on. But I was hearing it. I just couldn't get through. I'm the moderator, but I'm right here, right now.
Okay.
Now, okay, you're doing a fine job here. I know it's very difficult, but you are giving details. That's why I wanted you to come on here. You're naming names and you're giving details. Now, you mentioned that Daniel book. You said that you had a part in writing that.
I have never seen the Daniel book. I left Jehovah's Witnesses in 1997, and it hadn't been published yet. So I'm not sure what is in it. I don't know.
Well, what chapters did you have a play in?
I specifically had years of involvement with Daniel chapter 11 and 12.
Well, and you say you never saw that.
No, I have never seen it.
Well, after my conversation with you, I went in there and I checked that out. And I have to tell you that they were talking about contact with angelic beings.
Well, I know that there was a book from the early years of the Watchtower Society called Angels and Women, and we had a copy of that book. That book was my bedtime stories. It was a purplish bluish book, and
you say your bedtime stories. I mean, did your father read that to you?
Yes.
Well, what do you remember about that book? Because that is a known book. I mean, in fact, from what I understand, it was even published by the Watchtower, but I'm not totally sure on that, but they did endorse it. Some have said it was published by it, but I know they at least endorsed it. But what do you remember about that book, Angels and Women?
It was the story told by a fallen angel about his experiences as a fallen angel and how he wanted to get back into God's organization.
No.
And supposedly the book was channeled to someone. I'm not sure, but I think the book was channeled to a woman. But supposedly the book was channeled. It was his story. It was an angel's story.
Yeah, now these angels, Rutherford was also involved in this type of foolishness, and also Woodard, the editor of the Golden Age. And he even mentioned Woodard, the editor of the Golden Age, that he actually came under some type of a demon possession as well. In fact, he even mentioned that Rutherford did the same thing. But we see that with the Watchtower promoting this angels and women, they were getting their information from other sources other than from God himself. And when you were being channeled, so to speak, did you feel any presence? Did you feel that what you were being told was not from God or from some unknown source? How did that all work?
I didn't have the impression that it wasn't from God because I wasn't expecting it to be from God. I knew where it was coming from. It was coming from a demon. But I wasn't afraid of this demon because in my experience, there were scary demons and then there were demons that were not scary. And this particular demon was my demon. I knew his name. I used his name. I called him. He came when I called. And he protected me. A lot of times he protected me just in my daily life, in my normal daily life. He was almost like what you would perceive of a guardian angel. I have found out now, since I have left Jehovah's Witnesses and I've gone to the Catholic Church, I found out now that what that is called it's called demon obsession rather than possession. I wasn't possessed. He didn't possess my body. I had the sensation that he had his hand on my shoulder, that he was laying his hand over top of my hand as I was writing. He wasn't in my body. But demon obsession is when the demon is obsessed with a human. And that's what happened. And he was a part of my life. I knew what he looked like. I knew what he sounded like. And I didn't, at the time when I was very young, I didn't know that this wasn't normal. A lot of little children have what they consider to be imaginary friends. There are a lot of anecdotal stories told about children seeing angels. So this wasn't something that was creating a dissonance in my cognitive abilities at that age. It was just something that I thought was a normal thing. And he wasn't bad. He had never treated me badly.
But nonetheless, was this the same angel that was kind of teaching you and telling the so-called hierarchy of the Watchtower certain things? Was that the same angel?
Yes. Uh-huh. Now, there were instances in my daily life when I was confronted with other demons, and they were scary. But in those instances, it was my demon who came to my aid. And I actually developed a sympathetic relationship with this entity.
Well, Raven, I have to tell you, this is really a fascinating story. And I know many online tonight, they're probably saying, what? They've never heard of this before. But I just want to remind people that you are listening right now to the 6 screens of the Watchtower conference call. And our guest is Raven Giuliani. And she claims that she, as a Jehovah's Witness, when she was younger, actually was involved with demonism. She claims that the Watchtower was actually using her as a young person as a conduit, somehow, some way, a spirit medium that was able to give them information from the demons above. Now, I know that sounds bizarre to people. Raven is on our call tonight because I've talked with her in the past here, and she seems to have the details. She seems to be naming names, and she seems to know a lot of things as far as pockets of occult are concerned involving the Watchtower. And Raven, where are some of these pockets of the occult?
Well, I spent every summer, at least 2 or 3 weeks every summer of my life from the time I was 2 years old, right up into my teen years in Biloxi, Mississippi. Biloxi is an area. Miami is an area. Southern California, specifically San Diego, and a lot of the what's called the Inland Empire, the desert, Southern California desert areas between San Diego and Los Angeles, Southern New Jersey, Pittsburgh, Memphis. I've also had some contacts in Atlanta, and I suspect that there may be some hot spots in Wisconsin because my father has been there. I have never personally been there, but that was one of the places that he moved to on his own. Lived there for a few years.
I'm just gonna see if we can go back. I don't want to bring up bad memories at all here, but you're seeming at least to be willing to talk about this, and I know it's very difficult. You want to break away from this. Are you broken away from this till this day, Raven? How do you feel about it today?
Yeah, I am today. I am right now. But when I first left Jehovah's Witnesses, I actually did go to the occult because that was what was familiar to me. And what had happened was I had a very bad last year with Jehovah's Witnesses. I never thought I would be one of those weak ones that would give in to the emotional stresses of being a Jehovah's Witness. I just never thought that would happen. But the last year that I was a Jehovah's Witness, I had just a lot of things come just pounding down on my head, and I was in a very vulnerable place. I had just completed 15 years of regular pioneering, and I basically was just reevaluating my life and realizing that there was nowhere else to go with Jehovah's Witnesses. And I wasn't getting any kind of encouragement. I was in a very vulnerable emotional state. I had seen 2 suicides and a murder that year. So there was a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I decided that in order to make myself feel better, I would go back to the original love, to the love I had at first. And in order to do that, in my mind, I needed to go back to the original literature, the old stuff. So I got out my Paradise Lost to Paradise Regained, and I started reading it, and I was absolutely shocked. I was astonished. There was stuff in there that I don't even remember believing, but obviously I did at one point, and I surely didn't remember it being changed, which obviously it had been. I actually found stuff in that book about 1914 being the time of the end and all of the tribulation already starting, but we were waiting for this second half called the accomplished end to happen, and I'm like, what is this? And when did they change it? And how did they change it without anybody knowing about this? And so I was just getting bombarded from all sides, from emotional sides, from doctrinal and intellectual. I got out the Kingdom Interlinear. I looked up some scriptures. I was reading something in Revelation chapter 7, and I came across a scripture that talked about the great crowd being before the throne, and a couple of verses down it said the angels were before the throne, and I'm looking at the Greek word, and it's the exact same word. So either the great crowd's in heaven with the angels, or the angels are on the earth with the great crowd, because we were told they were in two different places, but this is the exact same word. And I thought, what, do they think we're dumb? So I went to the internet, and that was basically all she wrote. That's what actually took me out. It wasn't the occult stuff that took me out. In fact, I had been away from the occult stuff. It basically stopped when I was 15 because we moved away, and I was no longer being used in that capacity. So here I am at 34, trying to get the feeling I had back then when that stuff was going on back, because that's what I associated with authentic Jehovah's Witness belief. And I couldn't get it back. I couldn't get it back. If it's still going on, it was going on without me. And you know, I have no doubt that it is still going on to some degree. Most of the men that I knew are gone now, but there are still a few of them still there. Ed Jarrett's is still there. He was definitely involved.
What this does, Ray. This now you do know, and I mean you're in a very peculiar situation here. You do know that so many people have a hard time believing with what you say. Now, has that happened? I mean, when you speak up about this, how do people react?
Well, I haven't spoken up about it because of that. Because I didn't want to sound crazy, and I knew that one of the things that would validate what I had to say would be the people that I knew and the names that I knew and the descriptions and that sort of thing. And I was really afraid of it because I have been threatened. I have been threatened. I think most of the threats have come from my own family. But when I left Jehovah's Witnesses, I lost everything. I lost my family. I haven't spoken to I never spoke to my grandmother again. She died 4 years ago, and I wasn't even told when her funeral was. I haven't spoken to my father in years, and the last time that I was in contact with him, a Watchtower showed up in my mailbox with blood smeared on it. So, you know, he's not exactly what I would consider a safe bet right now. And I've also been concerned. My mother and my sister have not been involved with Jehovah's Witnesses for at least the last 20 years themselves. I've also been concerned about their safety. So I haven't spoken up about it. When I have, just in the last 6 months or so, talked about some of these aspects on some of the forums that I've been on, I have gotten a few pretty bitter, nasty comments about it not being possible and that sort of thing. But if you don't want to believe it, then don't believe it. It happened. The important thing is to get away from the cult, to get away from Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place. Whatever it takes to get you away from it, that's good.
Good girl. Well, Ray, here's the thing now. Let's try to walk the people through this because, I mean, it's going to be a very difficult thing for you, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It's going to be really hard. But if you're a Jehovah's Witness out there listening, or a former Jehovah's Witness, or anyone that's been touched by the tentacles of the Watchtower, to just put yourself in this position. Imagine if you were involved in some type of a ritualistic practice, let's say with the Watchtower, where they were using you. They brought you into a room, and they put you in a little cape, and they placed you in such a position that these demons would work through you and speak to them. This is a very awkward predicament to be in. And if you were there, I mean, Raven claims she's been there. And, you know, it's hard because it's so over the top. It's so hard to really picture all of this. But I believe that as we continue to move forward and we learn more about the Watchtower and all of the lies and all the deception and all the esotericness that they have been involved in, you know, some of this stuff, as you're suggesting tonight to us, Raven, and you're touching base with details. You're talking about the color of the tiles in these tunnels. You're telling us what type of light was there. You're telling us what color. These are the things that one should look for as details. And I have to tell you that it's amazing that you. I mean, I don't think you could have made this story up. And why would you have made it up? What reason would you have? So, I mean, people listening tonight are going to say, well, why would a woman like this make this story up? Even though it's hard for us all to believe, we know how secretive the Watchtower is. Some of this stuff does exist. Let's get real. And even if you're a Christian online, I think that you have to realize that Satan, the devil, really is controlling the Watchtower. It's no question about that. I mean, you can't have a diabolical organization, a cult, a counterfeit Christian organization working and ruling without him. And this is just totally amazing when you come forth and say this. Now, I mean, you've thought carefully about this. Is this the first time you're really going public with it for the most part on the conference call, huh?
Yeah, basically the only other people in my life that I've ever gone into this much detail with, I haven't even gone into this much detail with my husband, but I have talked to a couple of Catholic priests. In fact, before I came on yesterday, I called a priest to talk to him about the advisability of actually going public with this, and his response to me was that perhaps 30 years ago, if someone else had had the courage to go public with hidden information, the Catholic Church would not be involved in the pedophilia scandals that they're involved with today. So I got nothing but support from the church and from my priests. I've also not ever been disbelieved by the Catholic Church. They know the power of demons. They deal with it. It's a reality to them. So that's another thing that has helped me. As I have been spiritually damaged. Faith is a big issue for me. To trust in another organization, in another group, and to feel safe with it, it's a big issue. One thing I want to mention, I've seen this online. Russell, there's a quote from Russell saying that the truth is the truth, no matter who it comes from. And this was in the context of even if the demons tell you, it's the truth. So this has always been the situation with Jehovah's Witnesses. This is not something new. This is not something that just started in the 60s and 70s. You hear about SRA, you hear about satanic ritual abuse, and it's something that just came up all of a sudden in the 1980s. This has been going on since the beginning.
Well, you know what's interesting here is I've been doing some research on this before you came on, and because we have so many Jehovah's Witnesses online tonight, in fact, even the Jehovah's Witnesses were the ones that said they wanted to talk about this. The active witnesses on our conference call, they were the ones that suggested, let's go back and revisit satanic ritual abuse. So what I did is I went through the Watchtower, and with help of my wife, we tried to come up with, is there anywhere in the Watchtower publications that they actually do refer to and talk about Satanism? And indeed they did. In fact, I can remember I was a witness at the time, and we got to roll the clocks back all the way to October 22nd, 1989. And that would have been in the Awake magazine. And I can remember being out in service in a car group. I hope David's listening because he kind of defined that term. But in a car group, that saw this publication. In fact, I can remember going out door to door placing it. It was in the Awake, and it was an eerie picture. On the front cover of the Awake was a picture of a young man with a black hood on, with a big dagger in his hand, and the title of the cover of the magazine of the Awake was Satanism, a Growing Menace. Now, the Watchtower has brought this out. They're not oblivious to speaking about it. It's right there in 89. And it's a deadly growing menace, according to the Watchtower. There's a box on page 3. The box says, hard to believe but true. I'm going to read you the box. I'm going to show you how the Watchtower really identifies with Satanism. And they have to identify with it because we're saying right now that they participate in it. So let me read you the box, and then you can draw your own conclusions. But it says, hard to believe but true. A publication of the Missing Persons Unit of the Pennsylvania State Police reports investigators may find it difficult to believe the strange and bizarre tales of criminal acts being committed by persons wearing priestly robes and adorned with symbols of the devil. Yet according to the bulletin, hardly a day passes without reports of violent acts conducted by Satanists. Across the country, law enforcement organizations are receiving reports of homicide, mayhem, assault, suicide, child abuse, and animal mutilations that are linked with the satanic cult. Now, they've had a whole article here in the Awake all about satanic ritual abuse. In fact, it went on for pages and pages and pages. It looks like at least 10, 12 pages here. I think the whole Awake was devoted to that. But what the Watchtower has always done, and it's somewhat sneaky, they know they're involved in some type of abuse themselves. But yet they have to spill the beans on everybody else. So they're admitting, if you're a Jehovah's Witness on here tonight, and you're listening to Raven, it's imperative, it's important that you realize that your religion teaches about Satanism. But the thing they're not telling you is perhaps they're involved in it themselves. Now, Raven is an excellent example, and even though many on here will not believe what she's saying, some will, some won't. She's naming names, she's giving details. She has a very awkward position that she finds herself in. We're going to be opening up the lines. We're going to be asking Raven some questions. But before we do that, there's just a few more things I'd like to discuss with you. Raven, you're right there, right?
Yes. I wanted to say when you were talking about how they tattle on everyone else for something that they're doing, that's called hiding in plain sight.
Is that what it's called? I was trying to find that term, Raven. I'm going to jot that down if you don't mind. What's it called?
Hiding in plain sight.
Hiding in plain sight. In other words, someone is mentioning someone else is doing it, but they're doing the same thing.
It's a diversion. It's like tattling on someone.
So you've heard that term before. That's
definitely.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I'll tell you, I've caught them doing that so many times, and I really do thank you for telling me what that term is because they do that all the time.
My father explained it to me this way when I was a child. He said, you have a right hand and you have a left hand. He said, you do not let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. On the right hand, we worship Jehovah during the day. On the left hand, we worship Lucifer at night. He said it was the greater luminary and the lesser luminary.
Now,
he had all the scriptures for it.
Now, you sound like a pretty sharp woman. I have to say that. I don't see where there's any way. I mean, you didn't sit up late at night and come up with this story, did you?
No. In fact, there have been thousands of times in my life when I wish this story wasn't real.
How do you deal with it? I mean, when you go to bed at night, how, as you look back on the years, I mean, does this demon still make himself manifest or what?
He can. He's still a threat. I would consider it to be a threat probably for the rest of my life. But you know, I pray. Like I said, I'm involved with a group. Perhaps for some, when they leave Jehovah's Witnesses, it's important that they do not get involved with a group again. For me, it was important to get involved with a group because I need the group protection. And it was also very logical for me that I would go to an old group and a big group, and that's why I started looking into Catholicism. What was surprising to me when I did was, even though I had never been inside a Catholic church before, I knew everything that went on in that ritual. I knew everything that went on because I had already seen it done backwards. I'd already seen the negative of it. That's what happened when I was there with Jehovah's Witnesses. For all their hatred that they spew about the Catholic Church, I've come to realize a lot of it's just jealousy.
You know, I've often thought that too. In other words, what you're saying is these satanic ritual abuse. Now, it wasn't sexual, it wasn't violent, but you're saying
not for me. It wasn't. It could have been for someone else.
It could have been for someone else, but in other words, these same things were taking place in the Catholic Church. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the way the rituals were set up, it was set up like a mass. It was set up like what would be considered sacred to some, and it was desecrated with Jehovah's Witnesses. It was, at least the ceremonies that I was privileged to, they used incense, they used candles, they used the same tools that have been considered tools for reaching God for centuries, and yet they were using it in the most diabolical ways. They were using it to reach demons instead of angels. They were talking to demons.
Now these rooms, in fact, what fascinates me, because we brought this up before, in fact, 2 weeks ago, a woman from London, England, brought up the idea of the tunnels and what have you. But you say there was some secret rooms under the headquarters of the Watchtower in these tunnels. Now, how big was the room? Well, let's walk us through this. Let's take a walk in. We're entering the tunnel. We're walking through the Watchtower below, and we enter a room. How big was the room?
I would say the room was about maybe 12 by 18. It was a little longer than it was wide. It wasn't a large. It was like somebody's living room.
All right. Now there were seats there, kind of like a little book study, right?
Yeah, basically. Usually there would be a center aisle, and there would be maybe 3 or 4 rows of 3 seats across. I don't always remember it being full. I don't remember seeing the people, because when I walked in, it was before the ritual started, and then I was put in the little closet where there was usually there was water if I needed to wash, because I had to be clean. I had to take my hair down. If I had it pulled back in barrettes or ponytail, my hair had to be down. I put the little robes on. I undressed down to my underwear, and I put the little robes on. And most of it I was attending to myself. I don't remember there being anybody there helping me do it. But then I was brought back out, and when I was brought back out, it was already dark. The candles were lit. It was already smoky. And there was a little chair set up behind the altar for me, like I said. And I can remember a few times there was a little desk, like a little school desk, for me to lean on when it was going to be an especially long session, when there was going to be more than one notebook. I would have a desk.
Now, there were men in the room, a lot of men, right? Mostly men.
Yes. Yeah. I can only remember, the only woman that I actually remember involved in any of this, like I said, was Brother Sidlick's wife. And that was when I was a little bit older. When I was really young, I don't remember there being any women there at all.
Now, was she dressed in kind of a strange way, or what?
She was dressed like she was in costume. She was dressed like I always thought it looked like what Jezebel's wearing in the Live Forever book just before or in the Bible story book just before she gets pushed out the window. Or maybe Babylon the Great. Okay, it was a red dress with a purple cloak and a long necklace.
Did she say anything?
I can remember her being nice to me. I don't remember her saying anything during the ceremony, no.
Now, do you remember Dan Sidlick?
Yes, definitely.
Well, he was a governing body member. So, see, this is why I have you on the call tonight.
Well, I remember Dan Sidlick not just from at Bethel. Dan Sidlick actually came down to my house. He was actually involved in some of the stuff that happened out in the woods.
Now, would this be the woods behind your house?
Yes. I lived down in southern New Jersey, south of Vineland and Millville. I went to the Woodbine congregation. It was considered shore points. And Brother Sidlick came quite often, actually. And when he came, he would sometimes stay with us, but he would usually stay with the Hannons.
Now, I knew Brother Sidlick. In fact, I've met him on one occasion. So you're more or less suggesting here on the call tonight that, and it's good you can mention names because it gives credibility, because a lot of people, if they were making this up, certainly wouldn't do it. But what you're suggesting is Dan Sidlick, governing body member, was involved in these ritualistic practices.
Yes.
Yeah, you have no hesitation doing that, and also you mentioned Brother Henschel. He was the president of the Watchtower for a while, and he was there as well.
Yes.
Now, what was the difference between these woods rituals versus the ritual at the Watchtower Society in the tunnels? Any difference at all?
Oh, yeah, they were actually quite different. So I don't remember there being any altar in the woods. There were pits. They weren't really, really deep, but they were deep to a little girl. I had to be lowered down. I had to be put down in them. I couldn't get down there myself. So I'm going to guess and say they were about 6 to 8 feet deep. I could see the top. When I was down there, I could see the top. I usually had to sit on the ground. Sometimes they had something for me to sit on, but usually I was sitting right on the ground. And the thing that I remember most about them, because during the daytime, when they weren't being used in that way, the kids that I grew up with called them the snake pits, because there was always dead snakes in them. Now, ever since I was very young, my father made sure that I don't want to say that I was comfortable, because who can be comfortable with that, but that I was not especially terrified of dead things. He would take me out to the highway, and we would collect the dead cats off the road that got hit by cars, because it was very frequent when that happened. I can remember carrying the shovel that was bigger than me and heavy, and going out there and him making me scoop the dead animals out of the road. So he always had a thing with making sure that I was able to handle death and blood and whatever, and there were dead snakes in these pits. Now, in order for the snake to get dead, they had to be killed. So I don't know what went on before I was put down in the pit, but I would assume that somebody had to kill the snakes. And what they did with the snake blood or whatever, I don't know. I wasn't a part of that. But they were down there with me, and there would be more incense and smoke, and I would do my writing down there when I needed to do my writing.
Now, these notebooks that you had, who would have these today? Do you still have them?
No, I didn't keep any of them. I handed them over to Brother Swingle almost every time. I mean, I can't say for sure every time, because it happened hundreds of times. But usually it was Brother Swingle that I remember getting them, and I was told that they went into Brother Franz's office. I've never seen them in his office, but, at the time I had this picture in my head as a child of what it looked like in a doctor's office or a lawyer's office with all the books behind him. And I could just imagine, these notebooks on the shelf. I'm pretty sure he didn't actually keep them that way because they would have been too visible. But I was told that he had them.
Well, I have to tell you, really, Raven, it's amazing. I mean, I don't possibly see where a young woman like yourself could sit down and conjure all of this up. There's something here that, I don't know what reason you would do that, but it seems so, it seems strange, and many of the callers or listeners coming in tonight, they're going to say, what? I've never heard of this. But you know something I have to tell you? I was a witness for close to 50 years, my wife and I both, and there's a lot of strange things that take place behind the curtains of the Watchtower. And I'm so glad that people are willing to come out. You don't have to totally believe everything, but we have a young woman on here tonight that claims, her name is Raven Giuliani. She claims that she was involved from a young woman from 3 or 4 years thing. But we have a young woman on here tonight that claims, her name is Raven Giuliani. She claims that she was involved from a young woman from 3 or 4 years old up to about 14 or 15. She was involved in ritualistic practices at the Watchtower. She claims that a demon, they would bring her into an event, whether it be in a room under the Watchtower headquarters in New York or out in the woods somewhere behind her home. She claims that the Watchtower would actually rely on her to help them, I should say, to come to grips with what to teach. And then these teachings would show up in books. Is that correct, Raven?
Yes, and what would happen on the local level was I would also, my father pretty much divided my family. It was always me and him versus Mom and my sister. Mom and my sister was born physically ill. She was born with spinal meningitis, and because of that, she had some disabilities. So it was always Mom and the baby, and I was with Dad. And a lot of times, Mom and the baby would go home after the Thursday night meeting because Dad had an elders meeting, and they didn't want to stay most of the night with him. And I would stay with Dad, but I would fall asleep on the floor of the stage or out in the auditorium somewhere waiting for him. He would wake me up afterwards, and he, most of the time, Bill Hannon, sometimes Asa Parker, sometimes Tom Peters, sometimes some of the other brothers there, would have other meetings after the elders meeting, after everybody else went home. It would be in the library, in the second school where they had their elders meeting. And a lot of times it would be, what I remember prayers. I don't know if the prayers were in Latin. I know at least one time, I know it was a prayer that was said backwards. The words were said backwards. And whatever they had been meeting on, or if there was a question or something came up, a lot of times they would ask me to ask the demon about it. So it wasn't just what I was writing for the Watchtower. Some of it was actual local stuff. One situation that I remember when I was about 8 or 9 years old was they had been meeting with a man discussing whether or not he was to be disfellowshipped for smoking. And when I went into the room after they said the prayers, and I was sat down in the chair and I was handed the notebook and I was handed the pen, I told them to go out in the parking lot because that's what the demon told me to tell them. I told them to go out in the parking lot. And two or three of them went out in the parking lot, and what they found in the parking lot was that same man who had just been in there and told them that he was repentful and that he had stopped smoking, sitting in his car smoking a cigarette. So the man was disfellowshipped.
Well, no doubt, Raven, you walk the walk and you talk the talk, and you've got so much here to share with us. I can't believe a lot of things. I'm coming to grips with you. You no doubt have been touched deeply by the tentacles of the Watchtower, and many of our listeners are saying, "What? They've never heard this." But if you were a lawyer, well, let's just go with this, and let's say that the jury is listening. The cases have been presented by both parties here. How will you give us some statements to convince us? And really, I really appreciate what you're saying here tonight. And you didn't make this all up. Why would you? But give us as the jury some reasons to really believe that what you're saying is credible. Go ahead. I want you to convince the audience tonight that what you're saying is credible, because it's so, they don't hear of this stuff all of the time, and it just comes across as, whoa, this is a little difficult to deal with.
Well, this is what I would be thinking if I were still in the situation of being a Jehovah's Witness and I didn't know about this stuff myself. Look at what has been proven and has been found out in the recent years. The issue of pedophilia. What is pedophilia? If it's not demonic, I don't know what is. That is demonic, okay? To sexually abuse a child is about as demonic as you can get.
Okay, I'm going to play the part of the jury here, okay? And I'm going to let you know what's going through the jury's head as you're saying that. I do agree with that. Pedophilia is very demonic. It's a practice that is totally debased. So I'm going to play the advocate. I'm going to be the jury, and what you're saying, I'm going to kind of register through my mind. I agree with you on that point. Go ahead.
The other situation that I can think of right off the top of my head is the Watchtower's involvement with the United Nations. This is the wild beast. Okay, this is the number 666, okay, according to their own words, their own doctrine. And yet, they were intimately involved with it. It's another instance of demonism. This is, I mean, how much more entrenched in Satan's world can you get than pedophilia and involvement with the wild beast?
I have to agree with that entirely, Raven. I have counted over 4,600 references in Watchtower publications that were certainly telling us how bad the United Nations was, how devious, how diabolical, how satanic they were, but yet at the same time, the Watchtower organization was so willing to become an NGO member. That is disgusting. It's demonic. I agree with you.
The other thing that I can also think of is, since I've become an adult, I've tried to identify what this practice is that they did. I've come up with a few labels. There's Luciferianism. There's Enochian magic. You can look up, you can Google the words, okay? You can find out what it is. You can find rituals online. It pretty much describes some of the things that I remember. So when you look at the very beginnings of this organization, I've been to Russell's grave, okay? I've seen the pyramid, and not only is there a pyramid about 15 feet off his grave, it's also on the property of the largest Masonic temple in the United States. And you're telling me that this man wasn't involved in that? Look at some of the old books. My grandmother had the complete set of Insight in the Scriptures and studies in the Scriptures. I've read the stuff about the pyramids, and the whole reason why they even picked Brooklyn Bethel to set up the headquarters is because it corresponded to some of the measurements in the Great Pyramid in Egypt from where he was in Pittsburgh. If they took the measurements of the Great Pyramid and converted it into miles, and they came up with Brooklyn, New York. I mean, this is crazy stuff. This is just insane stuff that the very beginnings of this organization was based on. And, so at what point did they change? They didn't change. They just went underground.
Well, they didn't change at all, and I have to tell you, really, Raven, you're a very articulate young woman, and you're making a good case. And I think that it can be very convincing to so many people. Some people, they just might dismiss it. But, I mean, we do know, if you get on the 6 screens of the Watchtower.com, we do know that we have a screen on there on the occult. And we know that they have been involved in occult activity. How about Johannes Grieber? How about using his Bible, which was written under the direction of Demonism, to support some of their translations concerning John 1:1 specifically? So when you get in there and you take a look at it all, you look at the whole picture, you say, my goodness, is the Watchtower involved in occultism? The answer to that is yes.
Just the word Watchtower. Just the word Watchtower. What are the Watchtowers? The Watchtower are the Grigori. They're the fallen angels. Where did the word Watchtower come from? One obscure reference in a scripture somewhere, and the whole organization is based on it? Just the word Watchtower means fallen angel.
Isn't that something, huh? Do you still have that book, Fallen Angels?
No, I don't. When I left California, I left basically everything I had.
So you're living in Virginia now. Yeah. Now your husband, was he a witness?
Never. Thank goodness.
How does he feel about all this? Does he believe you?
Yeah, he does. He supports me entirely. In fact, he recently changed his career about 4 years ago, and he went into security, and he works for Homeland Security. He basically did that after I made a phone call to the FBI about the bloody Watchtower in my mailbox. He completely supports me.
Now, the FBI, I mean, your husband works at Homeland Security. Have you ever asked about FBI investigation?
Yeah, when I reported the Watchtower, they asked me some questions, and when I basically told them, not in the detail that I've gone into tonight, but I told them, I answered the questions they had for me. They said that because I was not claiming any sexual abuse, that there wasn't anything they could do about it, but they wanted me to know that the Watchtower is being watched and has been watched by the FBI for quite a few years.
Well, I've heard that before. What would you think the FBI was watching the Watchtower on? There's probably no answer to that. But
well, I would assume it's because they're a cult. It's because they're a high control group. They are a cult. When I was listening to David Reed tonight, I was thinking, I have an ABC of what makes a cult, and I know that there are a lot of explanations out there that go into a lot more detail, but for me it's basically 3 points: isolation, insulation, and demonism. And the demonism that I'm talking about is the demonizing of us versus them, which David Reed mentioned tonight when he was speaking. If they isolate you, which they do, if they insulate you, which they do, and if they demonize everybody else who's not them, that's my definition of a cult. And that's where I think the real danger with Jehovah's Witnesses is. I have to be completely honest with you here. I do not feel that I was any more abused by the Satanism aspect than I was by the daytime worshiping Jehovah aspect. Because it was the daytime stuff. It was the stuff that everybody sees in the Kingdom Hall that has hurt me the most spiritually. That's what's made me not trust any other religion. That's what's made it hard for me to develop a faith. That's the reason why I didn't know who Jesus was, just like David Reed mentioned. And that's the biggest thing that's hurt me.
Well, I have to really say this, Raven, that you're a real trooper, and no doubt you do know the dangers of the Watchtower, and you are aware of spiritual warfare, because that's exactly what takes place. There's forces of dark, there's forces of evil. Now, I want to mention to people listening tonight, if they like what's being said here as far as Satan at work, he's certainly trying to destroy so many people. Tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, if you'd like to join us, we have another conference call. The same numbers apply. We have our Upper Room Ministry Church. We have a house church. We'll be talking about spiritual warfare tomorrow. And we certainly encourage anybody that's online here tonight, if they'd like to come in and hear what former Jehovah's Witnesses talk about regarding Christ and true Christianity, you're certainly welcome to come in. And the same numbers apply. Just dial the same numbers you did as far as getting into the conference call tonight. We'd love to have you join us, and you can listen to the sermon, which starts at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. And at the end of the sermon, you can ask some questions on this, but obviously it kind of ties in with what we're talking about tonight. We know the forces of evil are at work, and where the Watchtower is a non-Christian organization, a cult, if you would, is if there's anything that keeps you awake at night concerning the witnesses, what would it be?
The idea that they might still be doing this, that there might still be some 3-year-old out there being possibly drugged, tranced, working with demons, giving them the information that they need to write their literature.
So that still does, obviously it becomes a modus operandi for you. You realize they may still be keeping up. You think they're still going through with some of these satanic rituals, these rituals where they bring young people in and use them as some type of a conduit for untruth?
I don't see any reason why they would stop. I don't see that the organization has made any changes.
Now, you say that you had some friends that have had similar experiences, at least these people you talked to online?
Yes. I've had quite a few tell me that they know about the tunnels and they know about the locked rooms. I've had quite a few tell me that. That was probably some of the first information that I ever got out of people.
Now, did they bring this up, Raven? And in fact, it's so important because I know how the listeners are thinking tonight, and let me tell you this: our listeners, first of all, are very intelligent. All of these people, they read so much, they're in tune with so much, so sometimes they become skeptical. But the people that you've been in contact with online, did they bring this up before you did, or did you bring it up first? The people that you've been in contact with online, did they bring this up before you did, or did you bring it up first?
Usually what happens is I will tell a piece of my story, but I will purposely leave out the details. And I will get half a dozen emails saying either, can you give me more details, or I remember this, or I know about this. Did this happen with you? But I've been very careful what I've put out there. It's only been in the last couple of weeks that I've actually put out some details.
What do you think is motivating you within the last couple of weeks, Raven? Why this fervor, so to speak, to get this information out? What's happening?
The new light's coming from somewhere. Jehovah's Witnesses in the last few years have been coming up with all these doctrinal changes. It's coming from somewhere. There seems to be an increase in the activity lately. I've been living in this particular house for almost 6 years, and the first 4 years I'd never had a Jehovah's Witness at my door. In the last 2 years, I've probably had half a dozen. So there's some sort of increase in activity going on. I will lurk on a lot of the forums and not talk, not even register on some, just reading the stuff. And I'm finding out about all of these new thoughts that they're getting. They're getting them from somewhere, and I know where they got them when I was a kid. They got them from me. I don't want to sound haughty, but
there's something that gave me kind of the willies tonight, if you don't mind. When you said that when you were brought in there as a young girl, and you were actually giving them information on the Daniel book. And I have to tell you, you didn't share this with me. There's no reason why I'd have to embellish this at all. But you did not share this with me. I just asked you, when I talked to you this week prior to the call, what chapters of the Daniel book you gave them information on. You said 11 and 12, was it?
Yes.
And what amazed me is, I went back. We have the most extensive library here of Watchtower literature in all of New England. In fact, that's where our conference call originates from, right here in the library. We have all the books all around us. And that Daniel book that you said concerning chapter 11 and 12, even though you did not know what's in it, you haven't seen it, right?
I've never seen it.
Well, what is so amazing to me is what you were saying concerning, this demon working through you and what have you, this angelic direction, as the Watchtower would call it. That's exactly what they were saying. They were saying in chapter, I believe it was 11, that it was a special box in there that they were saying that angelic direction comes from sometimes bad angels. Isn't that something?
Hmm.
You never saw that?
Oh, that's another example of hiding in plain sight, isn't it?
My goodness, I'll tell you, that gives me the willies when I even think about that, because, there's no reason that anyone online here tonight, after listening to Raven's story, can say this is all entirely made up. I don't know why a person would make this up. It just, see, what would be the reason? You're not making a lot of money on this, are you, Raven?
No.
You have a lot of checks coming to you in the mail?
No, definitely not. In fact, my father's still in New Jersey. It's still a threat. There's still a threat there. So I'm not getting anything from this except that I feel almost obligated for some reason at this point in time to discuss it. I keep thinking about 15 years of pioneering, and please, dear God, if there was anybody I studied with that became a Jehovah's Witness because of it, just, let them find out the truth. Let them leave. Let them get out. I don't want that stain on my soul.
Now, you don't have to give us your real name, but is Raven Giuliani your real name?
Giuliani's my married name. My name growing up was Pangburn.
So, you don't have to share the real name with us, but it's just interesting what you're willing to come on and discuss with us, and I'm sure there's many people on this line tonight that has a lot of questions to ask to you. Do you mind taking some questions?
I will be happy to answer what I can.
Now, obviously, I want you to know some people are going to be, they're going to discredit what you said. And I don't want you to be, kind of inhibited by what they're saying, just kind of because it's controversial, right?
Yes, I understand.
And what I extract from this, I've talked to so many people. I've tried to put together a very important website for people to get into and listen to, and a lot of people are. There are controversial issues, but when the subject of SRA comes up, it really just, people seem to develop two camps right away. I believe it or I don't. Sometimes people don't stop to even think about this. Some areas to at least consider. So I hope our listeners are at least willing to consider what's been said here tonight, and we're going to open up the lines. We're going to be able to ask Raven some questions on her satanic ritual abuse. But let's not take the word satanic in its worst form here. Let's not look at the torture, the sexual abuse, the sacrificing of babies. Let's calm it down a little bit. What Raven is saying is that she was abused ritually, pretty much on a weekly basis growing up, as some type of a conduit or spirit medium, let's go with that, where she was used by the Watchtower as some type of a channel of communication, that the demons were witnessing or speaking through her and feeding the information to the powers to be at the Watchtower. As bizarre as that sounds, let's see if we can't put some of this understanding in proper context. So we're going to open up the lines. If you have a question for Raven, hit *1, and let's ask Raven a question. Go ahead, please. *1, ask Raven a question. Go ahead. *1 for Raven.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Raven, in any of these ceremonies, and you described some and that there were some prayers, were there any other ceremonies such as joining hands together in a circle or saying any chants?
I don't recall that happening when I was brought out. It's possible it happened before I was there, before I was actually involved in the ceremony. My part was very specific. I had one job to do, and basically I was prepared ahead of time to be there for that job. Now, when I was in the library with some of the local elders, they were not sitting when they did this prayer. They were standing. They weren't in any robes. They were in their regular meeting clothes, their regular suits and ties. I don't recall them specifically holding hands. Nobody held my hand. I was not touched. I was set apart from them. I was treated very well, actually, but no one ever held my hand that I remember. And when I was in the secret rooms, I was sitting with my back toward them, so I didn't see what they were doing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've got Raven Giuliani, and she, former Jehovah's Witness, and she has been telling us tonight that she has been involved with satanic ritualism in the Watchtower. And if someone has a question for Raven, hit *1 and ask Raven a question right now. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Raven. My name is Barb Sinclair. I have a question for you.
Yes, okay, hi.
Hi. I'd like to say that it was a very interesting testimony that I heard. I'm on Pell Talk, and with me I have about 8 or 9 people listening. I did a quick Google search on your name, and I came up with the website where somebody with the same name has admitted to being a relation to Lucky Luciano, the Sicilian mobster, and that same person with your name had her mother was a daughter of Lucky Luciano. You verify?
Yeah, that's a possibility. My mother didn't know who her father was until she was well into her 70s, and then we found out through some paperwork after her cousin died, and I was actually trying to find out some more information about Luciano's family. His family name was not Luciano. That was a name that he assumed. But his family name was Lucania, and I believe you probably found some of the genealogy websites that I've been listening on trying to come up with the genealogy of the Lucania family on my mother's side. But yeah, that's true.
Can you tell me, are you a first-generation former Jehovah's Witness?
No, my grandmother was the first one in the family, so I would be third generation.
Third generation. And was your mother born in the United States?
Yes, she was born in Millville, New Jersey.
And was your grandmother born in the United States?
Her mother? Yeah, her mother was also born in the United States. She wasn't raised by her mother, though. She was raised by her mother's aunt, so she was raised by her great aunt.
Okay, so you're 3 generations Jehovah's Witnesses right from the United States here.
Yeah, and the generation from Jehovah's Witnesses, though, is on my father's side, not my mother's side.
On your father's side.
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
All right.
Very good, Raven. I'll tell you, we got a lot of people coming in here tonight. They're still coming in. And like I say, they're coming in from all over the world. They want to hear what's going on the conference call, and we certainly welcome them all in. Previously, you missed David Reed. He was on earlier. Right now, we have our special guest, Raven Giuliani. Now, Raven was a Jehovah's Witness, and she claims that she was involved. Please.
Hello?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, Raven.
Hi.
I have a couple of questions, actually. Are there any current governing body members that participated in the ritual abuse?
As far as I know of the current governing body, the only one that is left is Ted Jarrett's, and there is another governing body member whose name is familiar to me, but I can't honestly say that I know him specifically, and that would be Pierce. Now, Pierce was a name that I knew from my childhood that was involved with this, but I don't know if he was involved with it.
Okay, and then so what age did you start going to Bethel?
Oh gosh, what age? It was at least as young as 3. I remember that I associate the ritual starting when I was about 3 years old.
So they immediately took you to, was there any, you said they thought there was a cowboy or a demon in your house, and they just somehow knew you were chosen then?
Yes.
And so your father was a Satanist and a Jehovah's Witness?
Yes, I would consider him, from what I know now, I would consider him a Luciferian, because he did use the word Lucifer. He referred to Satan as Lucifer.
And so, let me see. How did you know that you were supposed to write?
I don't know how my parents knew, but they did teach me to read and write at a very, very young age. How I knew I was supposed to write was they just handed me a notebook and a pen. And it was almost, I guess, what you could consider an out-of-body experience. It was as if my arm was writing without me doing it. And
yeah, I understand what the automatic writing is. And so that was another question. I wasn't too sure if your mother was aware of what was happening.
I don't know how much aware she was. Like I said, my sister had been born sick, and my mother was pretty much absent as far as my childhood. She just wasn't really involved with me a whole lot, and even to this day, even though she hasn't been one of Jehovah's Witnesses for 20 years, I've probably only seen her 10 times in the last 20 years myself. I see her once a year. Usually I go to visit her at holiday time for a couple of days. We're not real close. We never have been.
Now, I'm trying to understand how the Luciferianism and the going to meetings worked out in your daily life. Did you do your home Bible studies, the once a week everybody gets together and does the Bible study? Did you study your Watchtowers, and then in the meantime your father was teaching you I don't know, Satan things. I don't know. How did that work out?
I remember a lot of times being told, this is what it says, but this is the way it is. And the reason that we know more than anybody else at the Kingdom Hall is because we're special, because we're smarter, because, you know, that we've got an edge somehow. And that's how it was always presented to me. It was always, I was always made to feel special. And as far as home Bible studies, that was always a struggle with us, but I guess that wasn't really that much different with anybody. From the stories that I hear, most people had a problem getting their home Bible studies organized. And because I could read and write, I was pretty much left on my own to study the book study and the magazines. It was a big deal for me to be able to answer the longest questions when I was a kid. It was a competition, so I always made sure that I was studied. I can remember my mother copying the answers out of my book.
So you, in your mind, what you were doing with the automatic writing, and you thought that you were doing that for Jehovah or the President of the United States, or?
Yeah, I thought what I was doing was good. I thought, you know, it was something special, and yeah, I was doing it for the President, and then later on, when I realized, you know, who the people were involved, I was doing it for the Watchtower.
And so you had, at what age did you realize what exactly you were doing?
I would say probably 8 or 9.
8 or 9, you started understanding what you were writing and what it kind of meant to the Watchtower.
Yeah, and at 12 I got baptized, and once I got baptized, it slowed down. It was not every week anymore. There was definitely a breach after I got baptized with my father. Our relationship changed. But I didn't leave the area until I was about 15 and a half. So for about 3.5 years there, I was still doing it, but I just wasn't doing it as often.
And was there any other rituals you practiced besides the writing? I mean, were there ceremonies?
Not that I recall. I wasn't involved in anything else that I can remember.
And so nothing was explained when they first took you to, who took you?
My father.
Bethel.
My father.
Just your father.
Well, we would be in a group. It'd be my father and a couple of other elders. They'd always, while they were there, they would pick up literature.
Pick up literature, go downstairs, give them the secret room, and worship the devil.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay, and let me see. And what happened after the meetings? You know, after your writing, you handed the book. And
I usually fell asleep. It was late. I was usually exhausted. A lot of times I don't even remember the trip home. I just remember waking up the next morning in my bed and having to go to school.
Okay, I think that would be it. So nothing was really explained. You just basically knew your position in life and happy to do it.
That's why I consider it abuse. I may not have been sexually abused, I may not have been physically abused, but the fact that I had no choice in it, and the fact that I really feel now that they would have just used me up. They would have used me until I died.
Oh.
When you okay.
Can I ask a question to Raven?
Yeah.
You mentioned Angels and Women, the book, and your dad read that to you when you were a child. Do you have any recollection of what that book was about?
I remember it being about a specific demon. I remember it was a fallen angel. I remember stories about life before the flood. And I remember that this demon wanted to come back, wanted to, basically the way it was presented to me, wanted to be reinstated, had been disfellowshipped and wanted to be reinstated. I know the demon had a name, but I don't remember it. I remember the book sat on the bedstand, on the stand next to the bed for most of my life.
Yes. So your dad regularly read it to you from when you were a small child?
When I was very young, yeah.
Did you read it?
I don't remember it. I don't remember picking it up and reading it on my own. After I was 15, I didn't have it. My father had it.
Did you recall the name of the heroine in the book? You remember?
Okay, it seems to me that I think the demon's name started with a K. I'm not sure. I don't really remember that. I remember the cover of the book more than anything. I remember it seemed to look old-fashioned, and I had a few other older books that had the same style to it, and I know it was like a dark purple, like a purplish blue color, and it had Greek letters that were rubbed off by the time I had it.
That's right. That's the book. The name of the girl in the book, her name was Aloma, and the fallen angel was Hesperus. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah. The name of the angel does. The name of the girl, though, still doesn't really ring any bells.
Well, Hesperus was the fallen angel that actually dictated, and it was a novel, and dictated the novel to a woman by the name of Smith. And the book was penned in 1878, and the original name of the book was Theola. And the woman who put the book together was J.G. Smith. And this was quite a popular book, but it was recognized as being a novel. And the fallen angel wanted to return to God's organization. And he was really, you could call him a demon, I guess. And the events of the book took place between the creation account and the Great Deluge. So that's your basic information about that book. Now, in 1924, a Bible student by the name of Edward Brennison revised it, and it was advertised twice in the Golden Age. And Brennison printed it, not the Watchtower. It was printed by A.B. Aback Company. It was a revision of Theola. And so it was renamed Angels and Women. I find that a fascinating book to read to a small child. It's a fantasy book. I have never read the book, but I have certainly heard a lot about it. And I wondered, when you read that book, how did it affect you as a small child? Or you heard the book, read to you as a bedtime story?
I think the reason that my father did it was to develop some sort of sympathetic relationship with my own demon. I think that he did it to make me sympathetic toward the demon and not be afraid.
Yeah. Your father apparently knew what he was doing. Now, you used to be Pangburn, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We knew the Hannons, actually. And I remember George Hannon, and I had no knowledge that he had schizophrenia, but I'm not disbelieving you. But he was at Bethel when we were there. And he was quite elderly, and we knew Mary Hannon, too. He worked in because he was way up there in age, he couldn't do too much, so he would be in the tunnel, and there was a room off the tunnel, and the door was open, and it was a room the size of what you say like your living room. When did you realize that as a Jehovah's Witness, that this was really a no-no? You know, that because on the, you know, we did, as witnesses, we did not to involve ourselves with spiritistic practices at all, and yet you were. So how did you put that together as a pioneer? Even?
As a witness, it never occurred to me that it was a no-no, because the way it was always presented to me was that as a Jehovah's Witness, that this was really a no-no. You know, that because on the, you know, we did, as witnesses, we did not to involve ourselves with spiritistic practices at all, and yet you were. So how did you put that together as a pioneer? Even? As a witness, it never occurred to me that it was a no-no, because the way it was always presented to me was Jehovah had the daytime and Lucifer had the night, and the ones that didn't know that and didn't understand that didn't know it and didn't understand it because they weren't special. And so it never occurred to me that there was anything wrong with that. I thought that was part of my being a Jehovah's Witness. It was all part of the whole. The daytime and the nighttime went together. They might have conflicted between themselves, but they belonged to one whole day together. And when I started having problems is when I left my parents' house. I was 23 when I actually got out of my parents' house and started living on my own. And from 23 to 34, that 11-year period in there, I was basically pioneering out of desperation. I was trying to stay with the organization that I knew growing up because I thought it was the right one in that form. And after I left my parents' house and I was away from my father, and I realized that the majority of Jehovah's Witnesses did not believe the way that I was raised, did not know anything, I kept telling myself it's because I'm living on the West Coast. I lived next to Bethel. I was in Brooklyn. You know, most of the elders I was dealing with, I was older than most of the elders I was dealing with. I had been pioneering longer than most of the elders had even been going out in service that I was dealing with. And I was dealing with people on the West Coast who had never even been to Brooklyn. So it was very easy for me to dismiss it by thinking, well, you know, I'm still special. I still know more than they do. And so that was my struggle. I really did struggle with staying in the organization for that 11-year period that I was in without my parents being in.
Well, I'm sure I can understand your feelings there. You mentioned that you had seizures when you were 2.5 years old. Could that be the medication that they were giving you, like, I think, Dilantin? Is that one of the medications?
Dilaudid was one of the things. I think that was a very, very good possibility that's what happened, because I never had seizures again, and there was never any medical explanation for the seizures that I did have.
Okay. The people that you mentioned at Bethel, Joe and I knew every one of them. Of course, the majority of them are now deceased. But we did know them, and we knew I'd say 3/4 of them socially. Was Brother Barr there?
I do not remember Brother Barr being there. I know of him, but I don't remember him being there, no.
Okay. But you do remember, what about Lloyd Berry?
No, I don't remember him either. And I remember him I remember his voice. He had a very distinctive voice, but I don't remember him being involved in the rituals.
Okay. What do you remember about Grant Suter?
I remember him being tall, or at least he was tall to me when I was a little girl.
Yeah, well, could you was 3 years old when you were taken there. That would have been about 1965, right?
Yes. What I remember is small, at least, I don't know if it was the same place I went to every time or not, but I remember it being a smaller tunnel off a larger tunnel. The larger tunnels were almost big enough to drive through. This was a smaller tunnel, maybe big enough for two people to walk down and without touching the sides. And I remember the floor tiles were the little teeny 1-inch square, like bathroom tiles. And I remember it being like beiges and browns. And the light was sort of yellowish light. And to me, it gave me the impression that it was waterproof. It just because it was all tiles. It was tiles everywhere, and it made me think of a bathroom or of the tunnels you go through in the cars when you go under the water. And it was off of the main tunnel. It was a smaller tunnel off of the main tunnel. I don't know when this memory might have been. I don't know if this memory is specifically when I was 3 years old, or if it might have been later on when I was 6 or 7 or 8. I don't know when this, and it was off of the main tunnel. It was a smaller tunnel off of the main tunnel. I don't know when this memory might have been. I don't know if this memory is specifically when I was 3 years old, or if it might have been later on when I was 6 or 7 or 8. I don't know. It's just the memory that I have of the tunnels. I remember the door that went to the smaller room. It was like a door you would see in a school. It was a door that had the bar across it that you pushed on the bar to get in, but they were locked. I'm not sure if I remember a small window in the door or not. I can't say if there was a window in the door or not, but if there was, it was not a large window. It was a small window. Yeah, basically, after I was 12. Yeah, it was a big issue when I started my period, and I wasn't used as much after I got baptized. I was 12 years old 1 week when I got baptized, and after I got baptized, there was much more emphasis on the daytime activities as far as Jehovah's Witnesses were concerned. That for me is from the moment I got baptized, that's when it started. Well, when are you going to pioneer? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? And the things that I remember, it almost was a polar shift in what my activities were, and my relationship with my father deteriorated greatly and quickly after I got baptized. And he was almost in competition with me after I got baptized. The year that I got baptized was the year that he started partaking publicly. He had partaken before and claimed to be of the anointed, but he never actually did it openly in the Kingdom Hall because, for one thing, he wasn't even born until 1936, and at the time it was believed that 1935 the sealing had already taken place, and there wasn't any more of the anointed. So, did it ever... I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. Finish your sentence, please.
So after 12 years old, from 1974 on, there was a huge shift in the activities that I was involved with. I still did the automatic writing, but it wasn't as often, and I don't remember making as many trips up to Bethel anymore. The last few years, I don't remember Brother Noor's last few years at all. He had been out of the picture for quite a few years by that time. I don't think that. I think he died. Did he die in 77, somewhere around there? I thought I was much younger when he died because from a younger age he wasn't involved anymore. It was primarily Fred Franz who was involved the last few years.
Did your dad actually introduce you to these men by name, or call? Were you calling them by name? Did you say brother Franz, brother?
Yes, I called them. I called them brother. I called them brother Franz, brother Swingle, brother Nor. Like I said, I was afraid of Nor. He was kind of mean, and I always thought that if I was going to get smacked for some reason, he was the one that was going to smack me. So I was kind of afraid of him anyway.
He was certainly stern. He had that kind of demeanor. He was stern. Did your dad, did he know these people for many years?
Yes, he did.
Right.
So my father's best friend at the time of my childhood, throughout my whole childhood, his best friend was Bill Hannon. So I believe that was probably the beginning of his connection with Brooklyn.
Was your father very manipulative?
Extremely. My father was very manipulative, and he was extremely charismatic. He had people either adored him to the point where it actually got dangerous, and other elders counseled him against certain actions and social activities, or people absolutely hated him. There was no middle ground with my father.
Did you say he is deceased?
No, he's still alive.
Still like 70, 72, 73?
Yeah, and we've been estranged since I've been married, because I got married in the Catholic Church, and he decided that he didn't want to have anything to do with me anymore. So it's been since 2002 that I haven't had any words with him, or any exchange or communication at all. But from what I understand, he is trying to be an active witness again.
I see. Did you ever confront your dad with your memories of what happened to you as a child?
Oh, many times. I've got, in fact, there's a letter that I wrote him that's actually online on the Jehovah's Witness memorial site for victims of the blood issue. I've put the letter on there for other people to read that I wrote him, confronting him, telling him that, you know, the way I was raised isn't what I found out Jehovah's Witnesses to be, and that he's been deluding himself all these years, and et cetera, et cetera. I've never received an answer from him.
But did you ever talk to him personally about what you call?
I went back to New Jersey in 1999. And I spent about 6 months there, and I did confront him personally, and he just basically told me that it was what it was, and he did what he did, and he has no regrets, and that's just the end of it.
You have a handicap?
I'm currently disabled at the moment, yes, because I have a mobility issue. I can't get around quite as much as I used to, and I have asthma.
I thought you did. Did you try to contact me many years ago?
I think I might have. I talked to Bill Bowen a few years back, and I think that he suggested I try to get a hold of you, and I think that was when I was living in Tennessee.
That's right. In fact, you were at a motel in Manchester, Tennessee, right off of Interstate 24.
Oh, I just moved there. Okay, yeah.
And then I understood that were you in a wheelchair?
Yeah, I have a wheelchair. I use it part-time. I don't use it all the time, but I do have to use it, like when I go to a mall or someplace that I don't know, how far the walking's going to get.
I see. Didn't you leave the area because something happened that you felt your life was in danger?
I moved to Tennessee away from New Jersey to get away from my father. Now, I had gone back to New Jersey in '99 because I needed to make sure that my mother and my sister were okay, and I wanted to confront my father, and I did. and I was there for about 6 months, and I left New Jersey to go to Tennessee. Actually, I left New Jersey to go to New Hampshire, and then my husband's job got transferred to Tennessee. So I had only been in New Hampshire, for a few months, and then we got transferred to Tennessee again. But yeah, I was definitely worried. I was getting threats, and that's around the same time that I got that Watchtower in the mailbox with the blood smeared on it, and I'd also made phone calls to the FBI.
And that was in Tennessee, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yes. Yes, I remember that. And where did you go from Tennessee? Because you were only here a few weeks, weren't you?
If I was still in the motel, then yeah, I'd only been there for a few weeks. We had a house that we moved into, but I can't remember what the reason was. It wasn't ready, or the electricity hadn't gotten turned on in time, or something. We had been in the motel for just a couple of weeks, and then we moved into a house in Manchester, and we lived in that Manchester Tullahoma area for about a year. And then he got project coordinator position with Comcast, and we ended up moving on the other side of the mountain, on the other side of Chattanooga, closer to Knoxville, and I lived there for a year. And he worked there until he finished that project, and then we ended up here in Virginia.
I see. That was around 2001, 2002, right?
Yeah, Yep. And 2002 I was in Madisonville, which is on the other side of Chattanooga, close to Knoxville, and that was the year that I came into the Catholic Church there in Madisonville.
Did you contact any witnesses at all? You were out in '97, so you didn't know any of the witnesses, right?
No, I haven't had anything to do with any Jehovah's Witnesses that I know of, unless it was somebody online. I haven't had anything to do with Jehovah's Witnesses since I left.
Okay, how did you think the bloody chicken came to the motel or the house or whichever?
I thought it was my father. I really did, because he knew the area that we lived in. He had lived in Chattanooga himself. That was where he had been disfellowshipped from. It was after I had already left the house, and I stayed in California, and they'd moved to Tennessee. And when he was in Chattanooga, he ran off with a woman he met at work, and he got disfellowshipped. He was disfellowshipped for 8 years, and then he got reinstated again. But since he knew the area, I figured it was from him. The Watchtower from him.
What congregation in Chattanooga was he disfellowshipped? Do you know? Do you remember?
I want to say White Oak, but I'm not sure, because I never went to that congregation. I only went there to visit one time.
Okay. There's a congregation in Chattanooga that I believe is White Oak.
This is Rick Farron once again. Now, obviously, the reason why we even had Raven come on tonight is because she knows a lot of the things that, she touches bases with things, doesn't she?
Mention Marina Sidlick, and did Dan introduce you to Marina?
Yes, Brother Sidlick used to come down and visit us in Jersey quite often. When I was living there, the congregation that I was associated with was Woodbine, New Jersey. And I can remember him coming down and giving special talks at Steel Pier down there at the Shore Points. They had an auditorium that had a tin roof on it, because I remember him giving a talk one time, and it started to rain, and we could hardly hear him because the building had a tin roof. But he would come down and visit when I was younger quite frequently, and I remember being invited to dinner, the houses that he would stay at, and different things like that. So I remember Marina.
But Marina was with him then, huh?
Actually, what I remember is it was about the time that they got together, because I do remember it being that he did not have a wife and then he did have a wife.
Never. They treated you with kindness. They were more interested in what you were saying or what you were writing. That's not clear to me. Well, you were being used by the demon, and was he telling you things that no one else could hear, and you just were writing them? What were the people doing that were sitting there in the dark with robes on? Just listening to you talk, or what?
No, I didn't talk. I just wrote, and I don't remember them doing anything specifically. Just standing there waiting
For you to finish. And as soon as when you had your purple garment on, your robe, and they sat you down, that seemed to be the clue to start writing. And only you could hear?
Yeah, my robes were blue. They were blue. It was a material like a bright denim, not a indigo denim or a faded denim, but like a bright blue denim. And I would come out and sit down, and they would incense the area around me so that it was very smoky. And then I would be handed a notebook and handed a pen. The notebook was very common. It was like what you would have in school, but the pen had a feather. It was a big, fluffy feather pen.
That's something. Well, it's been a fascinating chance to talk to you. I wish I had talked to you when you were here, only a few miles really from me. It's too bad we didn't cross paths then.
Yeah.
Well, Barbara, we thank you for calling in and asking Raven a question. We're moving straight forward here. We've got more questions, and thank you, Barbara, for coming on and speaking with us. And you had a lot of history to all of this, and I'll tell you, it's quite a call, and that's why we wanted Raven to come on with us tonight. Raven comes across as very credible. The details are there. She seems to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. I've talked to others that wanted to come on and were concerned about this, but I allowed Raven to come on because she has something to tell us that has a lot of detail to it. And I certainly appreciate her wanting to be with us tonight. Now, we have a few more questions for Raven, and then we're going to be closing the call down. So thank you, Barbara. Now, any questions for Raven? Anyone else like to say something?
Hi there, Joe. This is Joe.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. When your dad read the book, did he use like the big words, or like when I used to tell my kids stories, sometimes I go to a big book like the Bible, and instead of reading it verbatim, I would just kind of tell them the story. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just reading every single word. Or do you remember, you know that there were stories, but do you remember if your dad was reading verbatim?
I don't really remember if he was or he wasn't. As when he used to read to me from the Angels and Women book, I was quite young, and it's possible that he could have been doing verbatim, or he could have been, going over some of the larger words. But they had. I was very advanced. When I started kindergarten, I was reading on a 5th grade level, and by the time I was in 5th grade, I was at high school level. I always had trouble in school because I was always so far ahead of everybody else. So I don't really know if he was trying to make it understandable to me or if he was actually reading from the book, because I wasn't looking at the book when he was reading from it.
Okay, that's okay. I knew it could go either way, so.
Well, Raven, this is Rick Farron once again, the moderator here at the 6 screens of the Watchtower conference call. And we'll let one or two more questions go, because I know it's getting late here it's about 12:15 here now, Eastern Standard Time. You're on Eastern Standard Time too, right, Raven?
Yes,
You're in Virginia. You must be getting tired, and certainly I appreciate you taking all the questions. You've added a lot of buzz here tonight. A lot of people are still online here with us. I can't believe it. They're still coming in, and they want to hear what you have to say. But one or two more questions for Raven, then we're going to cut her loose so that she can retire and get some sleep here tonight. But any more questions for Raven, ask her right now. One more, go ahead.
All right. Now that Barbara took all the good questions.
Took all your good questions, Phil. I'll tell you, I'm glad you're hanging in here tonight. You must be getting tired.
I am.
All right, go ahead.
All right. What do you think of the artwork, the photography, and the paintings of the Watchtower?
Well, I'm a little bit biased because I was in a couple of them. In the Your Youth book, I was the kind of ugly little girl with the ponytail leaning over in the mirror putting the lipstick on the chapter that had to do with vanity. And
is that the one with the blemish?
I don't know, but I remember I was embarrassed about it. I didn't really want to tell anybody about it at the time. It was a chapter on makeup or vanity or something, right. and the girl was leaning across the dresser putting lipstick on. She had the ponytail. And I was also one of the last things that I did before we moved was I was photographed, and they ended up using that as the woman in the foreground, or at least starting from. I can't say that I actually looked that good as the picture turned out, but they used that picture of me to start the picture in the foreground in the Live Forever book of where the the angels are looking down from heaven at the women bathing. The one at the very bottom of the page was taken from a photograph of me.
Huh.
Now, as far as I've heard the rumors about the subliminal stuff,
yeah,
but I don't really know about that personally. I don't know anything about it.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, Raven, you've been a real trooper here tonight, and I have to tell you, you're in a tough situation, but you've handled yourself remarkably well.